The enemy has done everything possible to prevent you from watching this video, because what you're about to hear could destroy his kingdom. Valeria Guzmán was dead for 28 minutes and 15 seconds. During that time, she saw what Satan has been trying to hide from us for centuries. Jesus revealed to her the greatest lie of the enemy and the reason he does everything to keep you from praying. What she saw changed her life forever. She discovered that prayer is not just words. It is a weapon that shakes hell. If you have ever felt something trying to distract you when you wanted to pray, what you are about to hear will open your eyes. This will change your life forever. If you manage to watch this video until the end, I died, and what I saw revealed to me the greatest lie that the enemy has made humanity believe. My name is Valeria Guzmán. I am 38 years old, and I work as a psychologist at a rehabilitation clinic in Bogotá. I have heard hundreds of testimonies from people who have touched the threshold of death, but I never thought I would live one. What I saw on the other side changed my life forever. It not only showed me the brutal reality of the spiritual world, but it also revealed to me the most powerful weapon that the enemy desperately fears and that most people underestimate every day. This story begins on May 14th, 2024. I remember the exact moment my heart stopped beating. That is how long I was dead, clinically dead, but what happened during that time showed me a secret that he does not want you to discover. It all began like any other Tuesday. The traffic in the city was unbearable, and I arrived late to my office. My schedule was full, sessions with patients struggling with anxiety, addictions, and depression, problems that I had learned to address scientifically, but deep down I knew had deeper roots. At 2:37 in the afternoon, just as I was finishing a session, a sudden, intense dizziness hit me. I tried to get up, but my legs wouldn't respond. A sharp pain exploded in my chest. The last image I have is of my assistant shouting my name as I fell to the ground. The next thing was silence, an absolute silence that was terrifying. Suddenly, I realized, I didn't see the famous tunnel of light. I didn't hear angelic voices. Instead, I found myself in an immense space with no horizon, no walls. I felt an overwhelming peace, but at the same time, an expectation, as if something or someone was about to speak to me. And then I heard it, a voice that didn't come from outside, but resonated within my being, imparting a truth so intense that it seemed to penetrate every part of me. Valeria. It was just one word, my name. But in that moment, I understood more about God than in my entire life of church, study, and reading. His voice had the authority of the universe, but at the same time, the tenderness of a father who had been waiting for me all along. I didn't see him as depicted in paintings or movies. There was no human form that could describe what I saw. It was light, but not light as we know it. I'm going to show you what has always been happening around you, but your human eyes could never see. And in that instant, everything changed. It was as if I was granted access to a hidden dimension, one that had been there all along, but that I had never perceived. I saw my life, but not as I remembered it. I saw moments when I had prayed, and for the first time, I understood what really happened when I did. Every time I uttered a prayer in the spiritual realm, something shook. I saw dense shadows trying to surround me, creating walls around different areas of my life, my work, my family, my peace of mind. These structures were not metaphors. They were real. They were strongholds that the enemy had built with years of doubt, lies, fear, and distractions. But when I prayed, everything changed. Jesus allowed me to see what I had never imagined. My words, even those I had spoken with little faith, produced waves of light that expanded like an explosion. The shadows trembled every time I mentioned his name. Cracks appeared in those demonic strongholds, and when I persevered, they crumbled like sandcastles before a tidal wave. But the most shocking part wasn't seeing what happened when I prayed. The most terrifying part was seeing what happened when I didn't. Jesus showed me moments when I had felt the urge to pray, but had ignored it. I saw how in those moments, the shadows grew stronger. I saw how the enemy celebrated every time I chose to pray afterwards and ended up being distracted by my phone, work, or fatigue. And then Jesus told me something I would never forget. Now you understand why they struggle so much to distract you. At that moment, everything clicked into place. The enemy is not afraid of sermons, isn't afraid of Christian music, doesn't fear verses posted on walls. He fears prayer, because every prayer made in faith is a devastating blow against his kingdom. I saw demons specialized in making people feel too tired to pray. Others, experts at filling minds with worries just when someone was about to talk to God. Others were in charge of whispering lies. God doesn't hear you. You're not praying enough. You're not saying the right words. And I saw how many people fell into that trap, just as I had done so many times before. But then Jesus showed me something that filled me with hope. I saw prayers from years ago, words I had completely forgotten. I saw that my grandmother's prayers, a woman who had spent her life praying for her family, continued to destroy the enemy's plans over our descendants. Because what nobody tells you is this: a prayer never dies. The words we speak in faith continue to have an effect long after they've been said. They travel through time, dismantle the enemy's plans, and activate angels in ways we could never imagine. Jesus looked at me and said, "The enemy does not fear the Christian who goes to church, does not fear the Christian who reads the Bible occasionally, but he trembles before the Christian who understands the power of prayer and uses it." In that moment, I knew. Suddenly, I felt myself being pulled back violently. The light vanished, and the emptiness turned into chaos. I opened my eyes. I was in the emergency room. The machines were sounding frantically. My chest was burning. A doctor was shouting my name. I had returned, but I was no longer the same. Since that day, I have never viewed prayer the same way again, because now I know the truth, and so do you. The doctors couldn't understand how it was possible. My heart had been stopped for 28 minutes and 15 seconds. For them, there was no explanation. For me, the answer was clear. I had returned with a purpose. For days, my body was weak, but my mind was more awake than ever. I no longer saw the world in the same way. Every conversation, every moment of silence, every thought, I knew that behind the visible, there was something more. An invisible war. An invisible war that most people ignore, yet it takes place every day, every second. And the worst part is that most people are losing that battle without even realizing it. What Jesus showed me not only left me stunned, it devastated me. It made me understand why my life had been an emotional roller coaster, why certain problems seemed unsolvable, and why I so often felt that my prayers weren't working. I saw it with my own eyes. The enemy does everything possible to prevent us from praying. He doesn't attack us with obvious things. He doesn't show up with horns and tridents. His strategy is subtler and much more dangerous. He uses distractions, worries, exhaustion, and doubts. He uses our own routines against us. He convinces us that praying later is okay until that. I saw demons gathered in what seemed to be strategy rooms. They were dark figures, filled with rage and frustration, discussing how to divert people's attention so they wouldn't pray. If we can get them to focus on their problems instead of on God, we buy time. If we can distract them with their phone before bed instead of letting them pray, we strengthen our fortresses. Another added, if we make them believe that God doesn't listen because they don't feel anything when they pray, they'll lose faith in their own authority. At that moment, everything clicked. The biggest struggle wasn't against sin, but against prayer, because the enemy knows something that many Christians don't understand. Every prayer destroys his work. Then Jesus showed me something that took my breath away, the prayers I didn't make. I saw moments when I felt the urge to pray for someone, but I didn't. I saw occasions when I put off talking to God because I was busy in the spiritual realm. Those prayers could have been the key to changing entire situations, but they were never spoken. By not being spoken, the enemy kept his ground intact. However, What I saw next gave me hope. Jesus showed me that no prayer is ever lost. I saw requests I made years ago that I thought God had never answered, but in the spiritual realm, they remained active, dismantling enemy structures I wasn't even aware existed. I realized that prayer is not just a momentary act, but an eternal investment, something we launch into time that continues to have an effect, even after we've forgotten we did it. Then Jesus spoke to me with an authority that shook my soul. The enemy does not fear the Christian who goes to church but doesn't pray. He doesn't fear the Christian who reads the Bible occasionally. He fears the Christian who understands the power of prayer and uses it. Those words burned inside me because for years I had believed prayer was merely an act of devotion, something I should do. But now I saw the truth. Praying is not a ritual. It is warfare. It is a frontal assault against the forces operating in the shadows. The enemy does not fear our good intentions. He fears our prayers. At that moment, everything made sense. I saw how my simplest prayer had wreaked havoc in the spiritual realm. Every "Lord, protect me" had torn down plans for accidents. Every "God, I surrender this" had thwarted traps set by the enemy. Every "In Jesus' name" had unleashed an explosion of power that forced demons to retreat. But the enemy had made me believe that unless I prayed with eloquent words or for hours on end, it wasn't worth it. A lie. Jesus showed me something even deeper. I saw angels ready to act, waiting for the prayers of believers. I saw demons terrified when a person dared to pray with faith, not because of the believer themselves, but because of the power of the name of Jesus that flowed from their mouth. I saw how a simple prayer could change the destiny of a person, a family, an entire city. But then, Jesus showed me the opposite. I saw places where prayer was scarce or non-existent, and how the enemy reigned without resistance. I saw entire families destroyed because no one prayed for them. I saw generations bound by the same cycles of pain because there was never someone who rose up in prayer to break those chains. I saw schools, cities, countries, places where the enemy operated freely because there was no prayer coverage. Then Jesus looked at me and said something that etched itself deep into my soul. What the enemy fears most is the prayer you have yet to make. It was then that I knew I had to return. The next image I saw was outside the hospital. I felt intense and brutal pain. Absolute. Suddenly I felt my body again, the sound of the machines, the desperate voices of the doctors. My eyes opened, and I knew it. They said my brain should have suffered irreparable damage from lack of oxygen, but every test came back normal. It's a miracle, a nurse whispered. But I knew it was not just a miracle. It was a mission. The following hours were a whirlwind of questions, medical examinations, and looks of astonishment. But inside me, the only thing that mattered was what I had just learned. I had seen spiritual warfare with my own eyes. I had understood what the enemy fears most and knew I had to warn others before it was too late. The first few days after my return were strange. Everything looked the same, but I was no longer the same. I could be in a normal conversation, and suddenly I would feel deeply that something invisible was moving in the atmosphere. People talked about problems, distress, crises, but I knew the root of it all was not in the visible. It was a hidden war. I began to clearly notice the moments when the enemy tried to distract me. Every time I felt the urge to pray, my phone would ring. Every time I wanted to talk to God, thoughts about my to-do list flooded my mind. Every time I decided to pray with determination, fatigue hit me like an avalanche. But this time, I knew it was a direct attack, and that changed everything. Jesus had shown me that the enemy holds strategic meetings to keep people away from prayer. I saw with my own eyes how every Christian has assigned spirits to distract and discourage them. I saw demons specialized in making you feel that your prayer isn't good enough. I witnessed how they whispered in people's minds phrases like, "You don't know how to pray well. God isn't listening to you. You should pray longer. Otherwise is not worth it." I saw how those lies caused millions of people to abandon their prayer life. without even realizing they were falling into a trap. Why, the worst part was seeing how they celebrated every time someone said, "I'll pray later," and never did. In the spiritual realm, that was a victory for the enemy. Every time someone doubted and said, "This doesn't make sense," the kingdom of darkness gained more ground. But what terrified them the most was when someone discovered the truth. Because when a believer understands the power of prayer and puts it into action, they become unstoppable. That's why the enemy tried so hard to keep me in the dark for so many years. He sold me the lie that if my prayer wasn't perfect, God wouldn't hear me. Every prayer matters. Every word directed to God destroys something in the kingdom of darkness. And now I understood why the enemy fights so fiercely to keep us from praying. Jesus showed me that prayer is not just talking to God. It's an act of warfare. It is the most powerful weapon there is, and it is the only one the enemy cannot counter. From that moment on, I decided I would never underestimate the power of prayer again. As a prayer warrior, I stopped worrying about whether I was saying the right words or if I sounded spiritual enough. I simply prayed, and the change was immediate. I felt a strength I hadn't felt before. Distractions no longer affected me the same way. Doubts could no longer manipulate me. The enemy tried, but I already knew his strategy. And the most amazing part was seeing how my prayers began to transform my surroundings. I prayed for my family, and they started to heal wounds that had been open for years. I prayed for my friends, and out of nowhere, they began to draw closer to God. I prayed for my patients, and I saw how some of them found peace for the first time in their lives. But the most striking thing was what I saw in my own life. For the first time, I felt completely free. Jesus had told me clearly, the enemy does not fear a Christian who merely believes in God. He fears a Christian who prays with authority. And now I was one of those people. From that day forward, I made a covenant with God. I would never again ignore the importance of prayer. I would never again allow fatigue, distraction, or doubt to take me away from the most powerful thing I have, my relationship with God through prayer. Now the question is, what about you? If you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. Maybe the enemy has done everything possible to keep you away from prayer. Maybe he's convinced you that your prayers don't matter, that you don't have time, that there are more urgent things. But now you know the truth. Every prayer counts. Every prayer has power. Every prayer destroys the enemy's plans. The choice is yours. Will you continue to ignore the invisible war? Or will you take your place in the battle? Because I promise you this, the enemy fears the prayer you haven't yet prayed, and you have the ability in your mouth to make his kingdom tremble. Now you know. 20. Now you know. The enemy trembles when you pray. Will you let him keep stealing your prayer, or will you use your weapon? Have you ever felt like something was trying to stop you from praying? Like this? And share it with someone who needs to know the truth. Subscribe and hit the bell. What's coming next is even more shocking. Now, click on this video on the screen because if this story impacted you, what you're about to see will open your eyes even more. See you there.